Today, the VW Group is one of the dominant powers of the car world, comparable in size to General Motors and Toyota. If I was to pin this success on one man, I would say it is the brilliant Ferdinand Piëch, who, as well as bringing VW great success, also went a bit crazy with all his outlandish projects, commonly known examples of the acquisition of the Bentley and making a W12 Super GT, and of course the record-breaking, monstrously fast Bugatti Veyron, and the ill-fated Volkswagen W12 supercar. However, I want to talk about three lesser-known cars that did actually see the light of day, but never reached the same great popularity or success as the Bentley or the Bugatti or any of VW's other projects of the time, and they're all just completely absurd, really. I'll start with the best known of the three, the Volkswagen Phaeton. To even conceptualise building a car like the Phaeton is not all that sensible of an idea when you remember that Audi, who were owned by VW, they already had a luxury offering in the form of the A8, coupled with the fact that Audi had been moving up market and VW was still very much an ordinary man's brand. This is a very large problem in the luxury car market, where the sorts of people who typically buy these cars don't really want to be confused with Dave the janitor in his Passat. But this was not necessarily a car built with brand synergy in mind. In fact, it was more a response against Mercedes-Benz and BMW. You see, Ferdinand Piëch was unhappy that those marques had stolen sales from Volkswagen with their new and very ugly hatchbacks, the A-Class and the 3 Series Compact respectively. He also wanted to move Volkswagen itself upmarket, like what happened with Audi. And it wasn't just intended to compete with them, it was to surpass the S-Class and the 7 Series in almost every conceivable metric. It's sort of like someone throwing a stone through your window and then you hire a crane to go and level their house in response. When development of the Phaeton began, Piëch began the project by giving his engineers 10 parameters the Phaeton must fulfill. Only some of these were revealed to the journalists, with the rest actually being kept secret even to this day. The most famous of these parameters was that the car should be capable of being driven all day at 186 miles an hour, while there was an exterior temperature of 50 degrees Celsius. During this, the car would have to maintain a perfect interior temperature of 22 degrees. Now, no one short of Whistling Diesel would attempt something like this, not least because a car was electronically limited to 155, but this speaks volumes of the car Piëch wanted to build and the quality of the final product. Some other requirements were that all electric motors should be hidden for a cleaner appearance and that the car should have a torsional rigidity of 37,000 Nm a degree. The car would be built on the Volkswagen D platform, which itself was likely named after the V10 engine Volkswagen Concept D that previewed the Phaeton. The Phaeton was very well equipped, even more so than the A8, and it was more luxury oriented than the A8, which the A8 held more of a sports luxury saloon market. And this led to over 100 new patents filed that would be specific to the VW. It was also the first saloon car equipped with a V10, well before Audi started putting them in their own S8 and A8. Now, this wasn't the craziest engine the Phaeton was optioned with, however, and this is actually what the car is perhaps known for more than its luxury. The Phaeton was available with a W12 engine, the same engine that was in the Bentley Continental and planned W12 supercar, and was absolutely fantastic. It was perfect for the job. Well, when it was working anyway, and only until you got the bill for all the fuel it drank. As such, sales fell far below expected numbers, and the cars, especially W12 models, depreciated incredibly rapidly. So much so that you can actually pick up a W12 model whenever they show up for only £15,000. And not that I say you should, because it'll cost 3 times that much to run it, but I still like it, even though it will ruin anyone who buys it. The car was facelifted multiple times to try and improve sales, with little success, and a successor was actually planned, but the project was ultimately cancelled despite a near-production prototype being completed. The car would likely have been intended just for the Chinese market, because that's where the Phaeton sold the most examples. As for what I think of it, it is just fantastic. Just the sheer level of care and attention put into it makes it worthy of being one of the best luxury cars of all time. Not to mention the fact that it was offered with a W12 like a Bentley. It's just icing on the cake, really. And that engine does make it absurdly fast in a straight line. I mean, it's not track fast in the same way as a Jag Project 8. It's still a big, heavy luxury car, and it'll roll around everywhere. But it just surges along, and I don't have a problem with that. That's not what the car was intended to be. It was supposed to be a fully fledged luxury car. It just happened to be a rather fast, fully fledged luxury car. And yeah, I usually prefer a car with driving feel, but again, that's not what the Phaeton was designed for. But that glorious, glorious Phaeton wasn't the only car that I'm going to talk about here. If we jump forward to 2005, the Audi Q7 had just recently entered production. Now, I don't want to talk about the base car, as I'd be more likely to make unfavourable comparisons between it and a lump of whale fat than be in awe of its craziness and its outlandishness. But the base car is not what we're discussing here. I want to talk about the version equipped with a twin-turbo diesel V12 that gave it enough torque to pull a medium-sized continent. Now, the car likely came about as a result of Audi reaching the zenith of its diesel program, with the runaway success of the R10 TDI in endurance racing and the steadily rising sales of Audi and Volkswagen TDI road cars. Now, the R10 wasn't the first diesel to race, but it was the most successful, and what put diesel on the map as to make it a proper performance option and prove that it wasn't just for 4x4s and 1 litre eco boxes. In fact, Audi were actually developing a diesel R8, but that's a story for another video, and the car was eventually canned after it came up in the design process that every time the car tried to accelerate, the Earth would rotate a little bit faster. So, if you were Audi in 2006, what car would you use to help advertise the performance credentials of diesel? The aforementioned R8, the RS6 perhaps? Hell, even the TT if you're feeling a bit crazy. But no, let's not do any of those. Let's put it in the largest car we sell, a 2-ton slab of steel that has the same performance qualities as a suspension bridge. But why? Why even come up with something like this? Well, to even justify the car's existence, it had to piggyback off the fame and publicity that the racing models gave the TDI engines. V12 engines can also be exceptionally smooth due to each of the two 6-cylinder banks creating a perfect harmonic balance, and by putting them together at a 90-degree angle it lowers the car's centre of gravity, something that would be very useful in a car this large. Those reasons are partially why BMW used V12 engines in the 7 Series, and they still do in Rolls-Royces. It also has the upside of producing 493 brake horsepower and, more impressively, 738 pound-foot of torque, a frankly ridiculous number even by today's standards. This allows this big slab of Audi to reach 60 miles an hour in 5.5 seconds and have the usual top speed of 155, but let's be real, would you really want to go any faster in something that looks like this? Now, the whole car was never intended to be a serious big seller, even with the SUV boom that was going on. It was definitely supposed to be more an exclusive flagship model. Audi's marketing reflected that, with the engine being placed on a pedestal in showrooms and the car having its own separate brochure from all other regular models of the Q7. Now, despite what you might think, the car was only ever sold in Europe, as when Audi moved to sell it in the States, the 2008 financial crisis occurred, damning this incredibly over-the-top car to poor sales everywhere. The V12 TDI was eventually euthanized in 2012 with no true replacement, while the standard Q7 has, unfortunately, managed to keep soldiering on for 2 decades now. I mean, the thing is, would I ever want a normal Q7? No, I think it's ugly, unnecessary, over-the-top and stupid. But the V12? I also think it's ugly, unnecessary, over-the-top and stupid. But it's just so off-the-rails crazy, and it's got such a special, unique engine that it becomes more of a big, daft, lovable lump of metal than anything. And I do have a genuine soft spot for it, despite the fact that I should resent it as much as its lesser siblings. It is very much a guilty pleasure for me. But for the last car, I think it's so special, not because it's loud and flamboyant and over the top, because it truly is the ultimate sleeper. It blends into traffic as easily as a Toyota Corolla or a Volvo V60 or just about anything really. What you have been looking at, perhaps unknowingly, is the only production car ever fitted with a W8 engine. It's called simply the Volkswagen Passat W8, and unfortunately there's another reason you've never heard of it. It was, like the other 2 cars we discussed, a complete sales disaster for a multitude of reasons that I will soon get into. The car came about as a result of VW developing a whole range of new W engines for their whole range of new luxury cars. One of these was the W12 reserved for Bentleys and the aforementioned Phaeton. Another was the famous Bugatti W16, and the other was the 4-litre W8 that was put in the Passat. There was actually a theoretical W18 planned for the Veyron, but not even Piëch could justify that. While the W12 was envisioned to be in the most expensive and opulent cars, the W8 was planned to be in some more low-end but still expensive and luxurious options. Now, this left it in a weird position, which is likely why the engine was only offered in the Passat. In fact, from what I can see, it was actually more likely VW didn't have anywhere to put this engine at all, seeing as the Passat was much more of an affordable family car. It was much like the Mondeo or the incredibly boring Vectra, rather than a BMW 5 Series or something like that. But because the W8 engine was so small and compact, it would fit in the relatively small Passat's engine bay with ease, and it does lead me into thinking that this was more about letting the engineers do what they want and actually using the W8 engine we designed, rather than a project designed strictly to make the most profitable car possible. Now, the car wasn't the fastest thing in the world, but it still produced a respectable 271 horsepower. But don't get it wrong, GT3 RS, it's not a track car. Again, it's like the Phaeton and the Q7 really. It is more of a luxury cruiser. But you wouldn't really associate a Passat with a luxury cruiser, so to try and make the Passat a more upmarket proposition, it was given a much more generous range of equipment, including, as standard, heated and powered front leather seats, automatic climate control, wood trim and an electric sunroof. It was also blessed with VW's excellent 4-motion all-wheel drive system to keep the W8 on the black, certainly a far cry from the original car's humble roots, and in those days this was quite a large amount of amenities. This, however, caused the car to cost more than £60,000 in today's money, and as this looked exactly like a normal Passat, it had the same problem as the Phaeton did, if not worse, because you look exactly like Dave the janitor in his Passat, because you're in a Passat. As such, it lacked the prestige of a BMW, Jag or Mercedes-Benz, not to mention the VW Group's own offerings from Audi. The Volkswagen badge simply didn't carry the required status as many of the alternatives. The other problem was running costs. That W8, whilst an extraordinary bit of engineering, was prone to catastrophic failure if not maintained properly, which further frightened off buyers. The W12 never really suffered the same fate, as the people who bought those cars had a lot more money to spend. This has really contributed to the W8 being the ultimate sleeper bargain really, especially in estate form. In fact, you'd be looking at paying less than £7,000 for one, and as long as you maintain it properly, it will be an excellent, reliable car. I mean, yes, it does drink fuel, but what would you expect, really? Although, don't take me up on this offer, or they'll shoot up in price and be ridiculous money before I can get my hands on one. So, if you've enjoyed this video, perhaps learned something new and would like to see more, consider leaving a like on this video and subscribing to the channel, and hopefully you'll have a great day or night or evening or wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!